Hello, thank you for joining us today. I'm Louis Gadima. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for VisiApps, and we have our webinar today on why mobile workflow apps and not just mobile dashboard apps are really necessary for empowering your workforce in the field. This is a series of webinars that we're doing about how to get the most from your mobile apps. And our speaker is George Adams, who's the co-founder and CEO of VisiApps. What we're going to do is George is going to talk for about 15 minutes on this topic of workflow apps. If you have questions, please submit them through the questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface. And after 15 minutes or so, when George is done, we'll be taking your questions and answering them. And then when we're all done and when you leave the webinar, we ask you to just fill out a really short survey at the very end, which only has 2 questions. Will probably take you about 30 seconds, so we'd really appreciate that feedback from you. So now I'm going to turn it over to George Adams. George, take it away.
Hey, Louis, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for your time and attendance today. We want to get right to the points here so that you can have this new knowledge or other perspective on your decisions on how you go mobile and mobilize your business processes. So what we're going to be talking about here today is the whole context of the problems that companies are facing in really bringing their business mobile, really modernizing their business processes. And everyone has come up in the last 10, 15 years on web-based applications, server-based applications that run through desktops and laptops. And yeah, those have been great for what could be done with the technology at the time and before the emergence of the cloud and other capabilities, as well as the mobile devices themselves. But what people really want, as we see here in either field sales and field operations or field service and support, really mobile workflow apps that run on the devices that they have with them 24/7 and can really take advantage of the features of the mobile devices that laptops and desktops don't have. And so the issue that companies have been facing is that when they really want to do true workflow apps that really use the data, update the data, and make conditional task flow in the workflow of their apps, it's time-consuming. The only options have really been for coding those with either native code or coding libraries that have come along to help with some of the functions, but it still is often a multi-month type project, also often tens of thousands of dollars or more. And the key here is you also need to really be able to use legacy data and other cloud-based data sources as well, for either on-premise or cloud-based, so that you can take advantage of that data, not have to reinvent it or replicate it in the cloud in any other artificial virtual type method. And so what this means is that you've needed skilled resources or access to skilled teams at outside shops to do your apps. Those are expensive, hard to find. And the key factor here that we're going to talk about today is a method for building true workflow apps without coding or with very low coding, and also to really highlight the difference between what we call dashboard apps and what true workflow apps are for mobile and a mobile first or even a multi-screen work process type environment. So with that in mind, now let's take a look at just a few examples of mobile workflow apps, just to give you a flavor of what we're talking about here. This first one is an iPad app. It's got 20 pages or 20 screens total. These are 4 screens across the top of the slide. And this is a commercial property management app used by one of the world's largest commercial property managers for their salespeople to sell new leases or to show clients new lease properties, as well as for their operations and support people and maintenance people to bring up different floor plans on the second screen. Third screen, bring up work orders, work permits, building permits. On the fourth screen, we're just showing integration with Google Street View so that people can show where a property is located and the surrounding environment. So this was an app that was originally scoped out by this company, to cost over $100,000 to be created, and was going to take about 5 to 6 months, to get it done. This app was done with the Busy Apps platform that we'll show you just briefly a little later in the webinar today. It was turned around in operational form in about 3 weeks, and then about 3 more weeks of intensive testing. It's been in production use, for over 2 years with 500 users. And this uses a variety of different data sources on the back end, SQL data, QuickBase data, as well as several public cloud sources. A second example, and so there's another type of workflow on a much smaller company, but a company with about 200 people working across 6 different states, where these people go out and do detailing, for automobiles and service equipment, across the different areas. They sign up through the web to get their automobile detailed. It goes through into the app and sets up a workflow for each of the people to be able to pull up, the work order, read the VIN, number off the car, off the vehicle, capture certain data, or download it about the profile of the customer, step through the checklist of items that need to be done, and then when the customer is ready to review this, they can capture the signature of the customer, you see there on the 5th screen, and then tap to upload this into the environment for, tracking and for keeping a log of all the time and material and location of the different workers. So this is something that just couldn't be done with laptops, or would be extremely cumbersome to do with previous generation technology. This third workflow app here is one that's a major retail company with 6,000 locations in Asia. In this particular case, they use this as an app for their retail partners to report loyalty program functions, as well as to track inventory and other issues that they need to report back. This is running on a SQL-type database environment, actually in Switzerland, and with intense security capabilities. All of these have been built out, very quickly within a matter of days to a couple of weeks, and then in production mode and scaling very, very well. We'll show how that works here in just a few minutes. So what do we mean by mobile workflow? What's the real difference of taking this whole generation of desktop workflow and moving it over to mobile? Well, as you would know, you have a large screen with your laptop or your desktop, and over time, content has really been king. You have lots of room there to have multiple windows. You have your full keyboard, full mouse. You are really tied to a fixed location, however, and generally these applications are built around server applications that run in the back end, and that you're really using the laptop or desktop primarily as a client in a client-server configuration, or in that type of data entry, data update, data viewing. From a mobile standpoint, the fundamental difference here is that context is really the king. This is being able to have in your hand the device with the data, with the location, with the client profile information, the right info, the right next step to tap through in just a few taps for what you're doing right now, right in your hand. And that's what you can do, that's what you need to do, for true mobile workflow apps that we're talking about here today. To contrast that, with dashboard apps, and what we're showing here as a difference is that a dashboard app for mobile, this would be an app where you have an existing server-based workflow application, whether it's on SAP, Salesforce, or other types of various rapid app or coding platforms, running off the server. And you're basically providing your mobile device with the ability to view data and to be able to enter data, so that you can really get data in, data out. And in some cases, you can manipulate that to make it look a little nicer on the screen, but that's fundamentally all you can do beyond the workflow that's built into the back end. You can't take advantage of the various local and mobile functionalities. Now, with mobile workflow apps, yes, you can have workflow indeed on the back end and tap into that, or you can be tapping into the data sources in the cloud or in the on-premise, to get to that. But here's what we're talking about is really an engaging, modern, optimized navigation, user experience, so that you can get from startup to what you need to do quickly in a minimum number of screens, minimum number of taps, and you can really build it from the ground up as mobile-based workflow. You can build in GPS or indoor wayfinding and other capabilities, all the things you'd like to do if you were having a fully coded app that also has some degree of look and feel, not unlike some consumer apps, so that it's engaging for users, and your adoption rate will be very good among users, as opposed to trying to force feed them something as a new way to do their workflow. Now, another part about this is that a number of the traditional server-based applications will say, well, okay, all you really need to get on mobile is to, we now support responsive mode and responsive design, so that you can now see your app and run it off of the small screen. But all that's doing really is, squeezing that big screen navigation and multi-screen environment into a whole range of small, narrow screens, and so you're constantly scrolling up and down, back and forth to get to what you need to do. It's very inefficient from a navigation and a time standpoint for mobile users. What we're talking about here with, and what you'd be thinking of in a workflow app as far as the navigation, is to being able to start from the ground up, scoping out. Think of a plain sheet of paper where you start scoping out, okay, on screen 1, I want to have a login. Screen 2, I'll bring up a work order entry or other data entry capability. Maybe screen 3 then gives me a map as to show the different work sites that I need to go to today. And other screens would be for barcode reading, QR code reading, automobile VIN reading, signature capture, etc. And also you can build in functions that you may be able to take pictures of problems and get those back to a subject matter expert back at headquarters. All these types of things you want to do into an optimal flow, and then be able to get that out to users and update it and tune it as you learn more. So what we're talking about here then is, if we think about what a dashboard app does, in this type of way, it gives you, there are some tools out there emerging to give you a way to make it look nice, or to look and have a mobile-like design without coding. But then when you look at the other things you want to be able to do, yes, you can view and update data, but primarily from pre-existing server applications, rather than being able to really build new applications to the data logic or app logic level. And so you really don't have the ability to do custom data queries and app logic. And in this case, we're talking about without coding. Certainly you can do any of this with coding, but or with so-called low-coding platforms that have some features, but all of this requires the big bulk of the problem getting done with code for data logic and the back-end integration. Another factor is device features. You want to, some of these support certain features, such as perhaps the ability to use the camera or to read a barcode, for example, but not a lot beyond that. And finally, these apps don't have the ability to run offline. Now, this may not be as obvious sometimes to think about when are you not going to have internet coverage, but it's all too frequent that you may have workers that are certainly out in the way out in the country and lacking access, but quite often in the basement or inside steel-framed buildings in the middle of the city, you lose coverage. You want to be able to have your apps run offline, or have that as an option as well. And so what we're talking about here with mobile workflow apps, in contrast, on the right-hand side, is yes, the look and feel design, the user experience, yes, being able to view and update data, from a variety of different database or now Internet of Things type data sources that are emerging. And you really need to be able to do custom data queries and app logic in a very easy and straightforward way. You really need to build the app just as if you were going to code it, but do it in a drag and drop or visual fashion. And you want to be able to use all the device features, for audio recording, for GPS, for navigation, wayfinding, etc. And as well have the option and be able to operate in offline mode as well as online connected mode. So just drawing some contrast here between mobile workflow apps and dashboard apps. Now what we'll talk about here for a moment then is what is VisiApps? Why are we talking about this? VisiApps solution is a visual rapid mobile app creation platform. It runs in your browser on your laptop or desktop with a studio for you to visually design the user experience and data connecting and logic for your app. But what it does is gives you a full capability for the optimal task navigation, use of native resources, all with a whole range of no-coding widgets and actions you can build, and but also the very easy ability to insert JavaScript, to extend to a virtually unlimited range of low-coding capabilities, in this way. But we also provide the ability for rapid data access and app logic. So you can drag and drop secure connectors to your databases and IoT data, as well as be able to do a whole range of data logic operations without coding, and then virtually any other operations with easy or low coding with JavaScript or HTML5. Also, we have the ability for offline data sync, so that when you go out of coverage and come back into coverage, your users, it's totally transparent to users. It all takes just one click in the design step process to select that option to get that feature, with VisiApps. Now, what we have here with VisiApps is what's called a rapid mobile app development platform. This is a Gartner, major industry analyst, has been looking at all these areas for many years, and they've defined their RMAD category based on the skill set of the user. And as you see across here, the skill sets, people that know how to do PowerPoint, Excel, Microsoft Access, or similar simple database operations. You might get into JavaScript and HTML at the right end of that blue bar there. Well, this is exactly the vision and the framework that we've had for VisiApps in building out a visual rapid mobile app platform. It now has a category name, and so this is great because now a lot of companies are beginning to recognize this, feel comfortable that this fits logically into their repertoire of application development and user support. And Gartner is saying that by next year, and by the end of next year, over half of enterprise business users will have business users within over half of the enterprises using these kinds of codeless tools, based definitely on this. And Gartner has ranked VisiApps very highly in their reports, on RMAD platforms. Please feel free to check that out with them. So what does VisiApps do? Well, what it does is you bring up on your laptop or desktop the VisiApps Studio, and this then gives you you select from one of a number of different canvases in the middle that are your device that you're designing so with that you can select that either as a phone form factor, iPhone or iPad, or Android phone, Android tablet, and so forth. You can all of the apps that are created here are cross-platform, so they automatically run on both iOS and Android for the form factor you select, and they automatically adjust the screen sizes to the different screen size you're using on your device without any further user intervention. To the left are a whole range, shown in the green arrow, of widgets and actions that you can drag and drop onto the screens of your app. What we have here is that one screen that's being designed, and to the left, the various functions. At some point, a list view action has been dragged onto that page of the app, and then built out with what are the fonts, the color combinations, the style you want throughout your app, and so forth. Are all options over on the left. There's also an option with one click. You can specify offline versus online type operation. To the right of the device is another replication of that screen plus all the other screens in your app and your pages. And this gives you a storyboard to see all the functions page by page of what's happening in your app to be able to think that through and build that, at a page, page by page. And you'll see just to the right of the red arrow the data fields that are active within each of the pages. And so this comes into play then, and it really gives you the ability to lock into the whole data logic capability of VisiApps. When you select a data management function within the studio, you get a series of different pre-existing, already pre-built secure connection and connectors to this whole range of different data types for cloud and on-premise type data. So over to the left, you'll see a whole range of SQL databases, MySQL, SQL Server, all through QuickBase. That was part of Intuit, now our standalone QuickBase Incorporated with a Rapid App database solution for desktops. This gives you a nice way to use that for mobile. And you can use Salesforce for CRM, QuickBooks data for accounting, if that's what you're using in your firm, and so forth. To the right, along the way, further over to the right, AT&T approached us and asked us to integrate with what their M2X, or Machine to Everything, Internet of Things, ecosystem and middleware, so that now all the companies supporting that data can now be used directly in this fashion with VisiApps. Also, PTC ThingWorks, another leading supplier of that type of Internet of Things ecosystem and technology, you can use that. To the left of that, there's a growing range of providers of digital indoor mapping and wayfinding solutions, so that think about having a warehouse where you need a mobile app that brings up a list of SKUs that your person needs to load a pallet to go into a truck. This can give you the map and the navigation to get to those in an optimum fashion in the warehouse. I also, Micello is a world's leading supplier, have maps for a whole range of shopping malls, corporate campuses, as well as very large retail and logistics companies. So these, all of these can be done. And what you do is when you say, okay, you can mix and match all these data types. I now want to get to some SQL data in my SQL database. You enter your credentials to get with the security that you've already defined to get to that data. We're not a hosted solution. That means you have to have your data flow through us. It goes directly from your data back into your app that you're building. And then what comes up on the screen is all the active fields in that database down at the bottom of the slide. And what you do is, with the red arrow, curved arrow, drag and drop those as to where they're going to be used, and bind that to the app so that it will automatically use that data from that point forward without having to do any coding, in that. And we have a growing range of even more connectors coming, and you'll see announcements of those coming throughout the year here. To the far right, if there is one we don't support at the current time and you need it right away, there's a range of microservices, and you can do RESTful and JSON type interfaces if needed, but generally those are not needed as you go forward. Now, with that in mind, that gives you the ability to drag and drop where your data is used, and you can do logical operations here directly in this way of all of the create, read, update, and delete operations, just as if you had a full-fledged database running your app. You can do conditional branching. All of this can be done with data query logic with no coding as well, and that's in more of the details of the slide we don't have time to get into today. But we'd be glad to give you a full demo if that's what you'd like as a one-on-one type web share meeting. Now, I talked about being able to use JavaScript. Think about those different widgets and actions that you drag and drop onto your screen to build your user experience. In this case, we've simply dragged a button onto the screen, tapped on it, and that opens up a property sheet for what you want to do. If you just want to use there's a whole range of things you can pull down as to what's going to happen based on the tap of that button. Go to another page, open up a table, do a data query, do data operations, and so forth. But what we're talking about here is by being extensible with JavaScript, is that before and after any given operation that's automatically there for no coding, you can insert in those windows JavaScript. Often you can have JavaScript just to copy and paste for different functions, or to enter it directly and have a virtually unlimited app logic capability. These are all critical for workflow mobile apps. So with that in mind, we then go back to this and show you've now built your user experience, you've built the data logic and data connections, all in a drag and drop fashion, and so forth. And so when you're ready to test your app, you simply tap select App for Test, and you can immediately see it by downloading the VisiApps container apps on the Apple App Store as well as Android for Google Play. And then when you bring up your username and password, or you can then see the app running immediately. This is great for during app development. It's great for beta testing. It's great for getting out there for initial feedback. And as you know, mobile apps need updating and enhancing very quickly. Now, what we provide is the full capability for the binaries that you can distribute these as native apps in the app stores, or through EMM and MAM type system solutions, Mobile Iron, AirWatch, Aperion, and so forth. And we also have a VisiApps publisher. Our instant publisher gives you the ability to distribute apps, to your particular user base. And people often find these are very preferred methods to distributing apps, for workflow and business to employee or B2E type apps, rather than having them publicly available. But all those options are available just like any coded app. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to just wrap up with a few key takeaways. And one of which is that recall that mobile workflow apps really have special requirements, that they need the ability to have data query and app logic, as well as being able to use all the device features. They're not just tiny versions or responsive mode versions of desktop or legacy apps, on the server. Secondly, these are what you really want to do and need to do to get maximum return on investment, to really improve the efficiency and reduce the time for operations for your field workers. And this is to let people do what they want to do or what they need to do, be able to track that, and be able to complete those things even offline as well as online. And so obviously our thought here is that it really would be good to check out VisiApps for your workflow apps. But by the way, you can also do dashboard apps with VisiApps. There's no preclusion from doing that. You can certainly build apps that do that function as well. Routinely, those people that see that they need months and months and tens of thousands of dollars to get apps done, get them done themselves or with some of our development partners and app creation partners, our VIPs, in 10 to 20% of the overall time and cost, and having apps ready to go within days and weeks, a few weeks rather than several months. Also, every time you do an app update or enhancement, it's automatically pushed out to your users when they open up the app the next time. You do not have to have the app go back through an app store or app platform or distribution or a certification. It can immediately be available to your users, which is a vital requirement for mobile. So with that, I'll be glad to answer your questions and provide further information that you might like to get. Louis?
All right. Thank you very much, George. So for those who came in after my introduction, this is Louis Gadima. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at VisiApps, and George is the co-founder and CEO. If you do, we'll just take a couple questions here. We're coming up to around half an hour, but if you do have some questions, please put them into the question panel on GoToWebinar. So George, the no coding is really exciting. That's a huge breakthrough with those kinds of savings of time and money for developing workflow apps. What kind of data logic can you really do with VisiApps without coding?
Well, what you can do is you can do the various database operations you would be able to do if you were building this out as a server-based or desktop application. But you can think in terms of you've got a flow where you need a conditional branch, to go one step or another. You can do greater than, less than, equal, and other types of operations on any data field. You can then take that, change the direction of what your next step is going to be in the task flow as based on conditional branching in that way, so that you can then have it go to a different screen, pull up a different document or a different part of the work order, or it can take you to a next step based on different conditions. And those conditions could be the values in fields that are based on the customer or machine profile that you're working with and servicing. It could be based on Internet of Things data that's coming in as a temperature profile off of equipment you're servicing. It could come in off of location-based information, that's giving you a change in where you should go for your next project, your next work order, if conditions change during the course of the workday. So all of these things can be built into the app, the data logic and the query trees, so that you don't need to do coding, for that separately.
Okay, great. So does VisiApps enable developing the apps in teams?
Oh, absolutely. And what you can do is, generally people will come and sign up for a free trial account for 30 days and begin using VisiApps. It's then just a low cost to keep using it for development and test, $39 a month for basic capabilities. But multiple users within a company can all have their own account, and then within the studio, we didn't have time to get into that today, but within the studio, you can copy apps over to other users. You can share apps, and you can specify apps within your team and users within your team as either being testers, so that they can fully use and test the app but not make any changes, or they can be developers. They can both test and make changes and share those back with the team. So there's a full team capability, and routinely people are using those capabilities within companies today.
All right. Let's just do one more question then. And a reminder, please, when you do leave at the end, please do fill out that very short survey on your way out. But the last question we'll do today, this offline data sync, that could be really important, because I know when people, even in office buildings or hospitals or other places, sometimes you can't get a good signal, you can't get good Wi-Fi, and definitely when you're, out in the field, you can run into, dead zones pretty easily. So how does this offline data sync work?
Well, the way it works is that when you're in the studio, there's one option. There's just one option to select among the configuration and setup for your specific app. Do you want it to be operated in offline mode or not? And if you select that option, then what happens is that when you're in coverage, you have data, connectivity. You would then populate the local database on the device, with the appropriate and proper fields, that are used within the app from the back-end data. You then would continue to operate in that mode, except that when you go out of coverage, you begin using the local data within the device itself, the local database within the device itself, and continue to update and use the data, enhance and update it as you go forward and go through your task flow. When you come back into coverage, the app detects the fact that you've now got coverage again, and then automatically syncs the data with the back end, the new data on a last-in type priority basis. And we have a number of customers in production using this capability and working very well.
Yeah, that sounds very useful. So thank you very much, George. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll be sending out a note with a topic for our next webinar in February, and take care. See you then.
Okay, everyone, have a good day. Thank you for your time.